But then I question, how much do I need to act? How much do I need to do in order to reach that particular point or goal? To what extent is it on me to figure this out? If you can only support creators who provide value and make you think, please consider contributing to my Patreon page the next time you watch one of my videos. Hello everybody and welcome. Today I want to talk about the concept of letting go again. Now I know I've discussed this concept in the past, and I probably will again in the future, as I seem to need many reminders that letting go is the best option. But personally, I've been going through kind of a negative emotional state for the last couple days, and I just recognized it yesterday, which is humorous. This is something that I've always found quite interesting, in that you don't necessarily recognize your negative emotion or your negative state of mind until after you're there for a while sometimes. And it's entirely possible that you live in a negative state of mind for a good long while before you actually recognize it. Which means that we are so unaware of our emotions at times that you can be caught off guard like this, like I was. Which, according to, the teachings of law of attraction and things like that, you should always be, constantly aware of your emotions. But honestly, I don't think I check in with myself that much. I just don't consider that I wouldn't be happy, and so, it takes a while for me to actually recognize a negative state of mind. So, when I recognized this negative state of mind, I had to go back and be like, okay, so what exactly caused this feeling? What exactly caused me to dip down to this lower vibration for a little while? And the truth was kind of humorous to me, because I had refocused on a negative state of mind about my financial situation. I've mentioned a couple of times that, financials are one of the things that I struggle with the most, largely because, I don't want to go back and get a traditional job, and I feel like there's another solution out there if I can just figure out how to get it, and so on and so forth. So there's always a little bit of doubt in my head that I can actually figure this out, that I can actually create the kind of life that I want for myself. Which means that there is somewhat of a slight negative tinge looming over my financial situation almost all the time due to these belief structures. Now, these are definitely beliefs that I would like to get rid of, but I am so emotionally attached to them that realistically the only way I can get past them at this point is to let them kind of die down on their own for a bit. And, not focus on my financial situation. Now, I know for a lot of you, you would look at this and be like, oh, you can't do that, what happens tomorrow? What happens if you hit that wall? What happens if, you don't have enough? And I can totally relate to those fears. This is stuff I struggle with. And that's one of the reasons why it's so challenging to let go of the reins and trust that things will work out. And maybe a lot of you don't trust in the law of attraction in the first place. Maybe you don't like this concept. But for me personally, I found that my life works a lot better when I stop trying to control the specifics of how something will come into my life. Like with romantic situations, a lot of people tell you that the person they ended up marrying is not the person they expected to marry. They're so different from the ideal in their head, or the concept that they had swimming around for a while, and their spouse was nothing like that, and it was just kind of a surprise. Personally, I think this is how life is supposed to work, where you don't really worry about it because you have no idea how it might actually come about, so you don't freak out about it. You just trust that the right person will come, and in my situation, I have to trust that the right opportunities will come, or that, the right situation will come, or that the right audience will come, or whatever the case may be. The solution exists out there, and it is coming to me. And me focusing on how it's not here doesn't help it. So, when it comes to law of attraction, if you're one of those people who struggles with this concept, I totally understand where you're coming from. I tend to be very skeptical of new ideas. But if I see some validity in them, or, some grain of truth, then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I can try that. And particularly with things like law of attraction, nobody will know what you're doing unless you tell them. So if you're focusing on developing a positive emotional state within you and living in harmony with the world and things like that, nobody else will necessarily notice, except maybe by seeing the potential rewards you reap. And then they'll be like, wow, you're so lucky, it's amazing, how did you do that? Which, honestly, is a great reason for people to notice you. So, no, I'm not sure why, but I keep coming back to this two-slit experiment with photons. It was kind of a scientific experiment that came up. So I guess I'm going to go into this concept, despite the fact that I didn't intend to, and I'm not sure why it needs to be in this video, but obviously somebody needs it, so I will trust my gut on this one. To me, this double-slit photon experiment is a great example of how law of attraction works. And if you've ever heard about this particular experiment, you know that light can act as both a wave and a particle at various times. This is, or at the same time actually, it's kind of like a variation on Schrodinger's cat, where the cat in the box with the vial of poison and the deteriorating radioactive substance could be dead or alive, but you can't know until you check. So you could say that the cat is both dead and alive in the midst of the experiment. And that was a whole thought experiment anyway. I don't think he actually did that. But the photon in the two-slit experiment is that they send single particles of light, or single photons, through two slits, and they send it one photon at a time, and they kind of differ between the slits, which logically would mean that you end up with two vertical lines of light. But what they found when they were sending just one photon through individual slits at a time is they still ended up with a wave, where you had different lines of light kind of going like this, branching out from the middle and making an array, kind of like if you were shining a flashlight through the slits consistently, where the light was going through both slits at the same time. But what they found is if they had something measuring whether the photons were going through one slit or not, like they added an observation aspect to the slit, then the light particles did form two lines, which meant they acted more like particles. And this experiment was essentially saying that light is both particles and waves, and it can act either way depending on your observation or your expectation. Similarly, you have the disappearing electron issue, where electrons pretty much only appear when you expect them to appear, otherwise they don't. And there are many other scientific experiments that go along this particular line of thought. If you study quantum physics at all, you can understand the concept that things can be both true and false at the same time, and this is kind of where law of attraction starts functioning. I could totally understand why it's challenging to understand, and I'm not a scientist and I don't necessarily trust in science because due to things like quantum physics and whatnot, the amount that we know is actually much less than we think we know. So it seems ridiculous to me to base your whole life on science, but your call. So to me, this experiment is an indicator that we have an amazing amount of control over our own realities. They even messed with the light, or with the photon experiment and the double slits, with conscious thought, where they had individual people trying to cause the photons to act in a particular way, either to make them act as particles and cause two slits, or make them act as a wave and cause an array. And they actually found that people can alter the experiment just through thought. And it's far more effective if somebody has practiced that same meditation than somebody who has never meditated before. But they can alter the results of the experiment, which means we have at least some control over the physical outcomes of our reality, which means that our thoughts do transition into actual results in the physical world. So the question then becomes, to what extent? And this is where the challenge really comes up. This is where doubt becomes an issue, because with things like my financial situation, I know that my thoughts can have an impact on the physical world, but I don't know to what extent they can. To what extent do I need to think positively, and to what extent do I need to act in order to get that which I want? Now, with money, it's far more effective to me to focus on what I actually want, because I don't actually care about the money specific aspect of it. I just want to be free. That is ultimately what money is to me. Free-flowing money, where I can just have fun, I can just go on road trips, I can just, buy individual knickknacks and things from Amazon, which I love to do. I can buy new markers, I can, find canvases that I want to draw on, or, I can buy video editing software that I couldn't afford before, or whatever the case may be. That's ultimately what I want. I want the freedom that comes with money. I don't really care about the money specifically. So I know that focusing on the more general concept of the desire, the freedom, I'm far more likely to get to the financial well-being state that I hope for. But then I question, how much do I need to act, how much do I need to do in order to reach that particular point or goal? To what extent is it on me to figure this out? And I don't have an answer to that, and that's probably why it's so challenging to let go. There is no true answer here. I can't know the right course. And I was talking to my dad last night, and I told him that one of my biggest fears is that I'll never figure out how I fit into this world. That I'll never find my place, and that I'll never figure out this whole how to get through life thing. That I'll always be reliant on, other people to take care of me, and that I'll always feel this kind of guilt inside that I'm not taking care of myself to the best extent that is possible. And he essentially told me that, we all struggle with this kind of concept. We all struggle with doubt. We all struggle with how much we should act versus how much is up to the universe to figure out. And a situation like this, where I'm struggling not only financially, but with my position in the world and things like that, it makes sense that I would have doubts over it. But it's also not helpful for me to doubt, because it's almost impossible to move forward when you're in a state of doubt. So figuring out my financial situation and figuring out where my life is supposed to go and things like this requires a lot of trust. And trust is not something that many of us are taught to do. We're not taught to trust in the universe. We're not taught to allow life to kind of happen. We're taught to make it happen. And while I think there is some benefit in this concept of making life happen, we don't have as much understanding, or we don't have the necessary understanding in order to actually make that function. So you have to trust the universe and, let go of your fear, which is not an easy thing to do. So I tend to go back to Abraham Hicks, and that's what I did last night. Abraham Hicks is probably the teacher that I will always go back to in these situations, because I get so bogged down by the details and specifics of other teachers. Tony Robbins, very action-oriented guy. He gives you 101 different ways to accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. Abraham, though, says, just relax, essentially. Be more general, allow life to happen, free-flowing, dance, sing, have fun. And that's all you really need to worry about. And that is so much easier for me to do, because I can tell you 101 different ways to do something too. But I can't guarantee that any of them will work. The best I can say is that so far this has worked for me, and maybe it'll work for you too. And that's something that Tony Robbins does as well, is it's like, well, this is something that has worked for me, and it's worked for other people, so maybe it'll work for you too. But with Abraham, it's all about, if you're feeling a negative emotion, kind of release the feeling and allow life to flow again. You know, allow your chauffeur to take control of the car again. The way she likened it was, at the particular time in that video, they were on a cruise. And she noticed that day that they were not even halfway to their final destination. But since you're on a cruise, the whole point of the cruise is to go, not to arrive. And so she said, we're out here in the middle of the big blue ocean, and I can't think of any better place to be. You know, this is exactly where I want to be. There's no better place than right here. And they can look forward to the destination, and they can look forward to returning home and all these other things, but it doesn't help for them to worry about being in the middle of the ocean. You know, if Esther went into the navigation area, whatever that is on a boat, and, you know, took control of the boat, threw all of the navigators outside, and then tried to figure out where they were in the ocean due to the nautical charts or whatever, and steer them towards their destination, more than likely, she would actually cause more issues than she would solve. So that's kind of what we do with our own lives, is we find ourselves in the middle of the ocean, you know, part way between our starting point and our ending point. And if you're doing it right, you know, you're enjoying the journey, you're having fun, you're going to dinner, you're meeting people, you're talking, you're developing relationships, you're learning, all these other things. But if you all of a sudden realize that you don't know how you're supposed to get to where you're going, despite the fact that there's a navigation team just somewhere on the ship that already has figured that whole thing out, you start to head to the helm and take over and try to navigate the ship yourself. And you're actually causing more harm because you don't know as much as the navigators do. And that's kind of similar here. With the law of attraction, there's the concept of the higher self that knows exactly what it is that you want or need. And they or you, or, you know, whatever the case may be, are navigating you in the direction that you need to go. So all you have to do is trust that you're headed in the right direction, and then allow the world to kind of unfold before you. So I think that's everything I have to say today. I've struggled enough making this video, so I'm just going to end it here and tell you that for me, I'm definitely going to be working on letting go of my control in this particular situation. Again, I know that it's more helpful to me. Maybe it's more helpful to you. I don't know. Believe what you will. I'm not going to force you. But I do hope that maybe you give this a try. You know, you try to let go of your sense of control as well and allow life to happen. But that is everything. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something or grew a little bit. And I will see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.